can't mark a date and believe that that day you can turn it on. It's not about the date. It's about the commitment to yourself. It's about dating your purpose. It's about marrying yourself to your goals. It's about realizing that there is no one coming to save you but you. You have to be willing to put in the work. You must be willing to walk into success. You must be able to run past doubt. You must be able to go through the barbed wire of self-doubt and deprecating words that you have placed over yourself and tried to play it off like it was a joke, when in reality you truly believe that you don't deserve things. It's time now for you to speak life over yourself.
Losing. Most of you hear losing and it makes you cringe, it makes you afraid, you fear being embarrassed, you fear being judged, you fear looking like an idiot in front of a bunch of people that won't matter to you in 5 years. But here's the thing, being willing to fail, being willing to lose, will create such a competitive advantage for you because most people can't do it. Most people can't be seen falling on their face. So our options are to stay the same or to actually be willing to fail.
This is your time. You have greatness in you, and everything that happens to you, I've come to know. Some things happen to you, some things happen for you.
And that is what I do. And that is what you can do too. If you have something to change, if you want to change something, change it. Change it now.
All right, so we have Chris. Is that as Barakat? Is that how you say your last name?
Yeah, Barakat. That's good. That works.
Okay, perfect. Thank you and welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining me today. It means a lot to me.
My pleasure.
Will you introduce yourself?
Sure, absolutely. I'll give a quick background. So my name's Chris Barakat. I am a online coach, essentially, a researcher at the University of Tampa, and also a competitive natural bodybuilder who does a lot of research.
So I'm assuming you haven't competed in NPC at all then?
I actually have. So I've competed in the NPC at the regional level and have been fortunately very successful at the regional level. I just never have done nationals, even though I've qualified for nationals every time. So back in 2017, I did my first NPC show here in Tampa Bay area, and I won both my classic physique division and my bodybuilding weight class. And then in 2021, I did another local NPC show. It's the Hurricane Bay. It's like a St. Petersburg show. And again, I won my my height class in classic physique and my weight class in bodybuilding. So yeah, I actually enjoy watching both sides of the sport. But I just compete as a natural athlete, and I know that if I were to compete at the national level, it would be a totally different ball game. So I might do that down the road as a natural competitor and just kind of see where I land.
Wow, that's actually very interesting, because that's a part of the reason why I've been turned off by NPC, because of the it just feels like, as a natural person myself and a smaller person, that it's like, would be hard for me to be able to make it far in the NPC IFBB for that reason.
No, I understand that. It feels like an unlevel playing field, so to speak, if you know your competitors are doing things you're not doing. And it's also a different look that is kind of the standard. So there are some females that can do really well in the NPC and IFBB naturally, but that's like the 0.0001%.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, for the most part, the top competitors are taking some sort of performance enhancing drugs and, male hormone anabolic stuff. So it is something that turns me off as well. And I totally understand that.
Yeah, so I'm glad that, I have you to kind of bringing that into the light.
Yeah.
And then so would you mind sharing a little bit about your history and as far as like fitness and like what all got you started into fitness?
Sure. So when I was way younger, I was super passionate about martial arts, specifically Kung Fu. So I took that like seriously, from a competitive standpoint. And then after that, I took basketball really seriously. And once I realized I wasn't going to be playing Division 1 basketball and like making a career out of that, I kind of just needed a competitive outlet to channel that energy and to give my research in the world of optimizing body composition. So trying to maximize muscle gain and trying to develop the best strategies to efficiently lose fat and effectively lose fat in a more sustainable manner. So basically, everything I study is body composition related, sports performance, strength related, and very much in the body transformation space of things. I don't want to give a super long winded intro, but if you have any particular questions in regards to some of my background, I'd be happy to elaborate on some of those things.
Yes, I do. I have some as we get on through the episode. And then thank you so much for the introduction. And that's why basically so I found you, I've followed you for a while on Instagram. So, for the knowledge that um you share through Instagram, I think it's awesome. So
Thank you.
um yeah. Um, Now I know, so you're a pro competitor and you said you're from which federation?
Yeah, so I compete in the WNBF, the World Natural Bodybuilding Federation.
Okay,
So
so I'm not very familiar with that. Would you explain a little bit more, like how does that different from
yeah,
like NPC IFBB?
absolutely. So when I first heard about natural bodybuilding, I didn't even know it was a thing. So I'll kind of go down memory lane super quick.
Yes. Hmm.
When I was a freshman in college, one of my college classmates at the time, who ended up becoming one of my best friends, he told me he was preparing for a natural bodybuilding show. And when I thought about bodybuilding, I thought about people on the magazine covers of things like Flex Magazine or Muscular Development. So people that are 240 plus pounds and clearly using anabolic steroids or performance enhancing drugs. And that never really appealed to me. But when my buddy mentioned natural bodybuilding, I decided to check out the show. And long story short, they basically polygraph every single competitor in the INBF before you compete, the WNBF, INBF, and
Hmm.
then all winners in an amateur federation get urine tested, and all professionals get urine tested as well. So yeah, there are two sides to the sport. Initially, I was just familiar with the NPC and IFBB, but there are actually a lot of different natural organizations out there. But I do believe the WMBF is the best one in regards not only to their drug testing protocols, but they just have the greatest like international and global recognition. So they have athletes all over the world, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay. That's awesome. And then
Um, Regain like a new norm, right? And kind of get acclimated
mhm,
to what life is going to be like, as being a father and
right.
raising a child. And then once that becomes normal, and I kind of have like more clear expectations of what my my availability is going to look like and how much time and effort I can actually put into a competitive bodybuilding outlet, I'll make that decision. But I definitely will compete again because I know I haven't reached my genetic potential, and that is something I've
Motivating
always
enough.
wanted to do. Yeah, like
Yeah.
that's been the goal from day one, is like, what am I capable of? How far can I push my body? And I I was very, very happy with what I accomplished in 2021 competitively. I finally turned pro after 10 years, but I know I can be better, and I want to see what I can do in the pro ranks. So yeah, I will compete down the road, just not exactly sure when.
Okay, yeah, that I mean, everything that you're sharing makes total sense. I think I would agree with that, even if I was going through that experience myself. Um, so speaking of, what does your typically like your off season time frame then look like? Do you typically like take long off seasons
I
before you compete?
Yeah. So I take very long off seasons. It's really quick background in terms of my seasons. I competed in 2011 for the first time, and then early 2013. So it's just like a 16-month gap in between shows. And then I took off from 2013 to 2017, and then took off from mid 2017 all the way to 2021. So I compete every 3 to 4 years, call it, and I probably will keep it that way. As a natural competitor, progress does come relatively slow,
Okay.
and contest prep actually has some negative health consequences as well. And it takes quite a while to recover from that. So if I were to compete every year or every 2 years, I would look relatively the same, and it would be a lot more stressful, not just physically, but also like mentally and emotionally. So because competing doesn't pay the bills for me, and it's not something that I make a living off of directly, there's no real incentive for me to do that on a very regular basis, right? It's something that I do when I have the itch, because it's my passion, when I'm motivated to do it, and it's something I try not to force.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
love that you share all that because I think it's really important. The point of it that you make about, how slow.
Training a lot more purpose, right? So like I was resistance training in high school, and I was weight training at the very beginning of my college career, but there wasn't any purpose behind it besides like wanting to look more fit and be stronger. Um,
Hmm.
and that wasn't super motivating. Like, yeah, that gave me some drive, but I like having a competitive outlet. So once I ran into my buddy Devlin that freshman year of college, and I went to his first natural bodybuilding show, I really got interested in challenging myself through that outlet. And after seeing him compete, I did that same exact show 1 year later, basically like 365 days later, I was on that same stage,
Hmm.
and I basically caught the bug, they call it. So I fell in love with the process, the contest prep, being on stage, and being rewarded for all the hard work that goes into that endeavor. And then it just became one of those things where it's like, wow, I'm really curious to see what my genetic potential is and what are my natural capabilities. And something that a lot of people can either find discouraging or encouraging is that the best people in this sport, in terms of natural bodybuilding, both male and female side, they're like, people reach their peak at like 32, 35, 38 years old, 40 years old. So it was one of those things where I understood I needed to play the long game, and it's not something that was going to come overnight. But it
Hmm.
was also really cool because I didn't have to view it as a really short career where it's like, all right, I'm going to go super hard at this thing for like 1 to 5 years, and then I'm out of my prime or peak, and then you hang it up. So yeah, that's like a brief background in regards to kind of how I got started with fitness. I just needed a competitive outlet to channel my training endeavors and to give me more purpose, right? To give each workout a little bit more purpose. So
Yeah,
it's been
that's
a really fun
awesome.
journey. Yeah.
Hmm. Now, as you're explaining all that, what's your, I guess, your like long-term goals as far as like, do you plan on still competing long term or?
Yeah, it's interesting you asked that. So I do plan on competing again for sure. I just don't know exactly when that will be. I'm hoping it'll be around 2025, but my wife and I are expecting our first kid this June. So
Oh, nice. Congratulations.
yeah, thank you. Thank you. So that's definitely taking precedent and kind of just being like, I need to test the waters and kind of um, regain like a new norm, right? And kind of get acclimated
Hmm.
to what life is going to be like as being a father, and
Right.
raising a child. And then once that becomes normal, and I kind of have like more clear expectations of what my my availability is going to look like and how much time and effort I can actually put into a competitive bodybuilding outlet, I'll make that decision. But I definitely will compete again because I know I haven't reached my genetic potential, and that is something I
Motivating
always
enough.
wanted to do. Yeah, like
Yeah.
that's been the goal from day one, is like, what am I capable of? How far can I push my body? And I I was very, very happy with what I accomplished in 2021 competitively. I finally turned pro after 10 years, but I know I can be better, and I want to see what I can do in the pro ranks. So yeah, I will compete down the road, just not exactly sure when.
Okay, yeah, I mean, everything that you're sharing makes total sense. I think I would agree with that, even if I was going through that experience myself. Um, so speaking of, what does your typically like your off season time frame then look like? Do you typically like take long off seasons before
Right.
you compete?
Yeah, yeah. So I take very long off seasons. It's really quick background in terms of my seasons. I competed in 2011 for the first time, and then early 2013. So it's just like a 16-month gap in between shows. And then I took off from 2013 to 2017, and then took off from, mid 2017 all the way to 2021. So I compete every 3 to 4 years, call it, and I probably will keep it that way. As a natural competitor, progress does come relatively slow,
Okay.
and contest prep actually has some negative health consequences as well. And it takes quite a while to recover from that. So if I were to compete every year or every 2 years, I would look relatively the same, and it would be a lot more stressful, not just physically, but also like mentally and emotionally. So because competing doesn't pay the bills for me, and it's not something that I make a living off of directly, there's no real incentive for me to do that on a very regular basis, right? It's something that I do when I have the itch, because it's my passion, when I'm motivated to do it, and it's something I try not to force.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I love that you share all that because I think it's really important. The point of it that you make about, how slow progress is in order to make progress. And that's something that I think it's really important because I don't think a lot of people realize that. And now,
Mhm.
would you say that that's the same as far as like female and males? Because sometimes we have the perception that like males tend to, make progress quicker, and maybe it is, but I'm curious
Sure.
as to.
Yeah, so both males and females, I mean, when you are a true novice or beginner, you have the greatest potential to make positive changes in the fastest period of time. Um, I don't like putting black and white numbers on it, but I'll just use different examples. So like, you can make tremendous amount of progress in your first year and a half, 2 years of weight training. Like, you can make a lot of progress in a short period of time. For some people, they have a great first 1 or 2 years. For some people, those first 1 to 2 years, they're doing a lot of things wrong and they're spinning their wheels, so they're not making a lot of progress. And
Mhm.
then years 3, 4, and 5 might be more productive than years 1 and 2, just because they start figuring out what is better for them, and they kind of improve their training, they improve their nutrition. So yeah, the earlier on in your training career, your potential for growth and that rate of progress is going to be faster, generally speaking, unless you're doing a few things wrong and you really improve your approach. Then you can kind of have better growth spurts later on in your training career, once you start making some changes to your training and nutrition that really move the needle a bit more. So yeah, it is the same for males and females. And after your first 3 to 5 years of lifting, you should have a pretty good foundation of what your muscularity is going to look like. And then thereafter, a lot of it is more fine tuning, improving weak body parts, creating better symmetry, and getting a little bit more specific with things. But After your first 5 years of weight training, you should have accumulated a good amount of muscle at that point.
Got it. And then what would you say? And thank you, because that was some great information there.
For
Now, what
sure.
would you say that once you hit that, like, like you said, 3 to 5, especially like 5 mark, and in order to continue to make progress, what would be the most important aspects of that? Would it be like nutrition? Would it be like uh, the training aspect? Would it be the recovery aspect of it? I mean, obviously
Yeah.
all three, but you know what I mean? What do you think takes the most, or the biggest attention
For sure. I always feel like
into like the science part of the whole, you know, fitness and health and competing and stuff like that?
sure. So, while I was in undergrad, I was studying athletic training. That's what I have my bachelor's in, and that's basically like a sports medicine program. It's a hybrid between basically emergency care and sports rehab. So, for people that don't know what athletic training is, it's kind of like being a combination between a physical therapist and like an EMT, so to speak.
Hmm.
Um, so I studied that, and I thought I was going to do physical therapy for my grad program or a DPT. And I just fell more and more in love with bodybuilding and optimizing body composition. So I ended up switching over and getting my master's in exercise and nutritional sciences. And it was during my master's where I really got involved in the research side of things. I started helping out initially as a research assistant, helping out with some randomized control trials. And then over time, I eventually started piloting my own studies. And then I started running my own studies. And then I started publishing my own studies with my colleagues and everything like that. So, yeah, I've been in the research realm since super late 2015. And I've been publishing since 2017. So it's been a great experience. And I'm super fortunate because I get to research things I'm really passionate about. All the topics that I'm uh, kind of diving into are research questions that I'm super interested in. And it's been that way since I've been a grad student. So, yeah, that's kind of the quick backstory. And then immediately after graduating from my master's, the university picked me up as a part-time adjunct professor. So I teach there part-time and I research there quite a bit. So it's been a blessing. It's been a fun experience, and obviously a lot of learning has come through those collaborations and everything like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love researching, so I find that to be so amazing.
Mm.
And like you said, to be able to do on something that you really like.
Yeah.
Now I'm interested in the funding and this the support of, everything that you do as far as like your research and your studies. How does that work?
Yeah. So there really isn't much funding in the exercise science realm. Um, so a lot of the research that we do, like I'll give you an example. When we're recruiting subjects, all of that is just like literally spending time and hours and manpower. Subjects aren't getting paid. The researchers aren't getting paid. Literally, the only quote unquote support that we've had directly from the projects. Once you're 5 years deep, your nutritional habits should be pretty much second nature at that point. So what you do nutritionally in an off season at least should be very natural, very intuitive, and you should have a good understanding of food by that point and what your body needs and what you respond well to. So at that point, it's really the training that's going to move the needle more than anything. And it's that's true at all levels. Like training is what drives the positive stimulus and drives the adaptation, and your
Hmm.
nutritional intake is kind of what supports those changes to occur. So training is super, super important. And what generally happens with a lot of lifters over time, because they've improved their execution, their mind muscle connection, and they just have a better understanding of how to train. And because they're stronger, their quality of their training is usually better. So they can often get away with doing a little bit less total work compared to what they had to do when they started. So a really quick example of that, like when I used to, like earlier on in my career, I used to do 3 to 4 working sets for a lot of my exercises. And a bunch of days I would do a lot of different exercises for the same muscle group. Now that I am more advanced and I am stronger and my execution's better, my mind muscle connection's better, I can get a really good stimulus with just doing 2 really good working sets for each exercise at really high intensities. And there's really no reason for me to do 3, 4, 5 sets for the same exercise over and over, at least working sets, like really hard, challenging sets. So yeah, over time, you can kind of become more efficient with your training. And that just improves, again, the quality over quantity aspect of how much work you do. A lot of times in the beginning, people are spending 5, 6 days per week in the gym, and their training sessions might be an hour and a half to 2 hours long. And then as they've gained that experience, they might train 4 to 5 days per week, and they might get away with doing, again, less total sets per workout. So that's been pretty interesting from my personal experience, and also what I've seen from some of my colleagues and friends in the sport, the competitive world, that kind of also have had similar experience.
Wow. All right. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, for sure.
We'll be diving back into some of this stuff again in a bit, but now I'm also really interested as to how and at what point did you get in?
I've been a part of is we've gotten supplemental support from different sports supplement companies. So like, as an example, like Legion Athletics, my sponsor, they've sponsored different research studies that I've been a part of, where part of like a recruiting tool to kind of get these subjects to want to participate and stay in the study is like they get free protein for the entire 10 to 12 weeks of the study, like stuff like that. So they get literally a scoop of protein powder every day for all 30 or 40 subjects in the study. But that's the extent of the funding that I've been a part of. We're not like applying for any huge like NIH grants or anything like that. And there is a decent amount of funded research in the exercise realm, but that's usually in diseased populations or like overweight and obese populations. And we primarily research like trained subjects or college athletes, and there isn't really much funding at all for that stuff. So a lot of it is just based on passion and spending the time where we want to and answering research questions that we find really interesting. So it's like a blessing and a curse. It allows us to study whatever the hell we want to study, but it also makes it more, it takes a lot of time, and it makes recruiting pretty difficult. And yeah, there's no like financial compensation directly from what we do.
Yeah. Now, do you think there's a possibility that could change at some point, or what would it take for that to happen as far?
Yeah, I think it could change, but to a pretty small magnitude. There aren't going to be massive grants for exercise science studies, at least not in really well-trained people, right? It can improve for the general population, again, for people that have diabetes or different diseases, and people that are overweight or obese. But for like a bodybuilder that already is very healthy and is just trying to gain another 3 pounds of muscle, there isn't too much support in those like very specific niches, if that makes sense.
Yeah, even though I do see growth in just the fitness community and the competitions and stuff like that, it just probably still not enough for that to make a huge difference.
For sure.
Now, regarding so having the limited resources, how do you guys find it difficult to find the subjects then needed for your research and studies?
To an extent. We typically aim for around 30 subjects when we do a more chronic randomized control trial. It's not the hardest thing in the world to get 30 subjects to participate, but it would be a little bit easier if there was funding and support. And then a lot of other universities that get funding, or other kind of research realms that are funded, it's not just for recruiting, it's not just for the researchers, but it could also be for, different pieces of equipment or running certain assessments and certain tests, maybe blood work, whatever it may be, covering cost. So there's a lot of different moving pieces. It's not really a limiting factor in the exercise science world because that's what we're used to. So yeah, it's not an issue. It's really not too big of an issue.
Oh, that's good to hear, because
Yeah.
for some reason I pictured it'd be a little bit more difficult.
Yeah.
Now, if you let's say that you have like you said, typically maybe like 30 subjects. Out of the 30, what is the rate that most of them actually stick to what they're being told to do?
For sure. So let's say we have 30 subjects. We usually expect to finish the study with 25. So that's why we like to start even with a little bit more than that. We might start with 35 and finish with 30, just as an example. We usually see like anywhere from a 10 to 20% dropout rate. The thing is, all of the research that we do, the subjects are coming into the lab and they're training in our lab in a supervised manner. So it's not like we're giving them a training program and telling them to do it on their own and not actually tracking what they're doing. We're seeing every set and every rep that they do. So it's very, very controlled in our sense. And it could vary from, depending on what study you're looking at, for sure.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Can I quickly ask you
Sure.
two questions, just so I have a better idea of like how deep I should go and what your interests are? Is there like a specific category of physique sport that interests you the most, like bikini, wellness, figure, physique, or bodybuilding? And then what do you primarily do? Like, what is your area of study in, and what are some of your primary interests, just so I get a better idea of your audience and what you actually like, so I can kind of make sure I'm answering questions to serve you the best way.
Yeah, no, thank you for asking that. Well, when it comes to me, I am more of like bikini, but I also am really interested in like wellness as well,
Okay.
and even some figures. So I kind of like everything, but
Cool.
I primarily more, bikini. And then I'm sorry, what was your other question? I already forgot.
And then like, what do you primarily do professionally?
So it's lifestyle for me. I am just, I was certified coach, and I was doing a little bit of online coaching with some of my clients. I've been certified for like 7 years, and I've been training for like 10 years.
Okay, awesome.
And it's so interesting that, you mentioned that, because my first, like, I'd say 2 years, I was completely just doing everything wrong. And, it's when I started, researching and really getting into it, just because I realized, okay, I don't know what I'm doing and I need to figure this out. And I'm very prideful, and like, it took me a while before I reached out to a coach to get help, because I love learning. And, so I did a lot of that, and I implemented the stuff that I was learning. So a lot, both nutrition, I love nutrition, but then I also love, the recomping aspect. So that's always interesting. And for me, I love, like I said, I've never competed. I did trial prep myself. I did it, myself, and I learned a lot.
Cool.
And then I went and contacted with a coach who I was going to start prepping, and we did like a little off-season prep. And then, I was going to dive into it, and signed up and was going to do like I had a whole goal to do a competition, but I had to pull back because I had some health issues that, were a priority.
Absolutely.
And at that point, I was also considering taking some other, PEDs, just because I just felt like I wanted to go pro, and, it just didn't seem like it would be possible. So, but ultimately I am, I'd say that just love to do this long term, and it's really important that my audience can learn. I want them to learn both. It's because I'm going to be attracting both people that are starting to get
Yeah.
into fitness, but then also people that are more, I'd say, intermediate and advanced as well, depending
Cool.
on depending on the episode, I guess you can say, because I have a
Sure.
little bit of everything going on. So um feel free to dive as deep as you want to. I think so far you've been doing a great job, just like educating everyone on a very basic, level, beginner level, but
Sure.
also being able to add a little bit more of that, advanced information, I think is really cool.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and that's great to get a better understanding of your background. It's been crazy to see how much the sport has grown over the last,
Hmm.
10-ish years. Yeah, and it is complex. A lot of people only see the good parts of it, and they only see people getting in great shape, being on stage, looking super happy, but it's definitely not all sunshine and rainbows. There's a lot of ups and downs,
Yeah.
and there can also be a lot of negative health consequences if you're not being guided properly. Potentially you're working with
Hmm.
a coach that is kind of doing non-evidence-based practices or misguided practices. And yeah, it can be unfortunate because sometimes an athlete or a client can be very passionate and competitive, and they have the whatever it takes mentality, but
Yeah.
they also don't have true informed consent. So they don't necessarily know that, okay, if I do this or I do that, if I take this, if I take that, what are the potential negatives? And is it just short term, or can it be potentially long term? And
Yes.
yeah, there's a big lack of true informed consent, and that's something that really irks me the wrong way. And that's something that I think needs to be discussed a little bit more regularly in the competitive space, and a lot of spaces, to be honest. Even just the medical space with general practitioners and doctors, a lot of times people are
Hmm.
prescribed things that can have negative side effects, or they don't really have true informed consent, and they kind of just go into this thing blinded. They trust their medical provider, and they start taking prescription drugs that maybe they didn't necessarily need if they made a lifestyle change, or they made a dietary intervention change, or they started exercising more, whatever it may be, right? So lots of
Right.
lots of things to potentially address.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's been one of my passions, is to, because I see a lot of people wanting to take like the quick fix, and I'm a believer in doing things the right way, and it's what the long term is gonna make a difference, and that's what's the most important to me.
Abs-
So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Um, so yeah, so some of the I noticed that you offer a lot of resources. So I want people to make sure that they check out, because you have a lot of resources available. And there was one I found as a great read, was one that you were part of as a publication, along with several others who I'm actually very familiar with in the fitness industry.
Mm.
Like I saw Alan Aragon, is that how you
Yep.
say it?
Yep.
And I saw Brad Scott. So it was quite a bit of them. So it was
Yeah.
really neat to see that, you were a part of that. And that it was, I believe the one that I'm talking about was peak week recommendations for bodybuilders,
Yeah.
the evidence-based approach or something like that.
Yep.
Would you mind telling us a little bit about that? Because, and before you start, because I know that like the peak week is just like such a big deal for everyone,
Yeah.
and I think there's still a lot of misconceptions on that, and how even like not drinking water, I hear that still often, or the
Yeah.
low sodium, and I'm just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, it was an honor to be a part of that publication. So me and Dr. Guillermo Escalante were good friends and colleagues, and he reached out to me and every other co-author on that paper years back and said, hey, he was really interested in writing a narrative review paper, kind of going over how bodybuilders can optimally peak. And we all thought it was a great idea, and we kind of all had our different subsections and collaborated on that. But essentially, some of the biggest issues that we commonly see in the fitness space is the use of diuretics, so pharmaceutical diuretics, as well as the extreme manipulations to water intake and sodium intake. So there has been multiple deaths in the bodybuilding space during peak week, and that is basically always due to pharmaceutical diuretics. So what we highly recommend and what we suggest is, if you are truly in stage shape, we make this very, very clear. If you truly are at a good body composition to hit the stage, and you are very lean, your body fat levels are very low, there isn't too much that you really have to do, and you don't need to drastically manipulate every single variable if you want to step on stage and look good. So there are some key concepts and some key things that you definitely want to focus on. One thing is like maximizing your muscle glycogen stores. So when you've been dieting for a long period of time and your carbohydrate intake has been low, your muscles are going to be flat and they're going to be depleted of carbohydrate. So when you're not storing a lot of glycogen, when you've been in a diet for a long period of time and you've been exercising a lot, your muscles are literally going to be smaller. They're going to be holding less intracellular water, and they're going to be holding less glycogen. So one thing basically everybody should implement is some sort of carbohydrate loading scheme, right? And that can look different for every athlete, depending on their category, how much muscle they have, how long it takes that individual to assimilate those carbohydrates. So some people can do really, really good with a 1 or 2 day carbohydrate load, a more aggressive 1 or 2 day load. Some people might need 3 or 4 days of carbohydrate loading. Some people might look really good aggressively loading the day before the show. Some people need to taper off the day before the show, so they kind of tighten up and look a little bit harder or a little bit leaner. So there is a huge individual component to that. But yeah, the review paper does a really nice job of breaking up different subcategories and different variables and how that can be manipulated and why it should be manipulated a certain way if you're trying to really maximize your peak. But where most people miss the mark is truly not being lean enough. So maybe they have 2 or 5 or 10 pounds of more body fat to actually lose, and they think manipulating their water or taking a diuretic is going to give them a tighter look, and that's simply not true. So that review paper is a great resource for people to learn more about peaking practices. And then last year in 2022, I published a case study on myself with Dr. Guillermo Escalante and Dr. Scott Stevenson. And we basically ran a peak week protocol for myself that we went over in the review paper. And then we documented how that impacted my physique. So we took like muscle measurements, we took skin fold measurements, we took body composition assessments, cellular hydration assessments, a bunch of different things. And we reported that in a case study, which was pretty cool. So that's some of my experience or some of the things that I've been a part of in regards to the peak week literature, which has been really fun to dive into. And we actually have one more paper currently in review, and it should be published like any week now, but we've been saying that for the last month or so. So I don't know what's taking the journal so long, but one more study should be coming out, literally any day or any week now.
Oh, is it regarding the same topic?
Yeah, it's regarding peak week.
Got it.
Yeah, primarily in NPC competitors.
Test, a trial and error peak week, where you had a little bit of extra time to, before the actual show. You think that would be helpful?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we mentioned that in the review paper, running like mock peak weeks and doing these trial runs So yeah, give yourself plenty of time, try to get ready early, and then you can implement the trial, see how it does impact you. If it's for the good, great. Then you kind of keep that plan in place. If you ran a mock peak week and you looked worse, then you kind of know what not to do, and you can
Mm-hmm.
play it safer and do something less drastic, perhaps. So, yeah, trial and error is always a good option.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Now let's dive back into a little bit of the body recomp. Now,
Mhm.
could you just, walk us a little bit through what that even kind of means? Because I think that, especially like maybe for a little bit more of the beginner people, they don't realize that, how that play that's just so important when it comes to really, building our bodies and changing and how that process actually does develop.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, body recomposition is simply when you are building muscle mass and losing fat mass at the same time. And this is something we see quite regularly in beginners, so novice trainees, as well as like overweight or obese populations. And it is something that has been observed in the literature quite often in trained people too. So I published something back in 2020 on this topic, and then back in 2019, Jeff Nippert and I put out a nutritional guide called The Ultimate Guide to Body Recomposition that, again, covers a lot of the science, but also gives you the nutritional strategies on how to set up your diet to try to maximize these outcomes. But another component of body recomposition can also just be gaining more muscle mass than you are gaining fat mass, and therefore your body fat percentage is actually going down. And I think that's where a lot of people sort of miss the mark, and they don't realize that that is very doable in many, many cases. So, for example, I have a lot of female clients come to me and they say, hey, I really, really want to lose fat. I want to lose 15, 20, 25 pounds, whatever the number may be.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth of the matter is, a lot of these females want to improve their shape, improve their aesthetics. Um, and that isn't going to come just through. And it's quite interesting because this is where we observed a lot of them were severely dehydrated. A lot of them did really cut down their water intake way too drastically. A lot of them were underfed going into the show. So you have some people carrying a lot of muscle and they're legitimately scared to carbohydrate load because they have this fear of food after
Mm-hmm.
dieting for 12, 16, 20 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of scared to see how their body's going to respond. So they don't do what they should do, and they probably step on stage looking flat and off and soft, and it's a disaster. And then a lot of competitors are like, oh, I look so much better the day after the show, after they rehydrated and they ate a bunch of food. They looked really good, but going into the show, they kind of missed their mark.
Yeah. And so, first of all, that was such a great explanation that you gave.
Thanks.
And I think what it boils down to, I mean, if you agree, would be something like, the trial and error probably comes into play. And then not, underestimating the length of time that one should be prepping in order to be ready and to be lean enough to not have to, like you said, go through those types of manipulations in order to get on the stage the way that they, should or want to.
For sure, for sure. A lot of people do underestimate how much time it takes to get contest lean. And then my buddy, Dr. Scott Stevenson, he says a lot of people hit the oh shit button. So they're basically
Mm-hmm.
1 week out and they realize they're not as lean as they would like to be. So they hit that oh shit button and they start throwing the kitchen sink of peak week manipulations in hopes that they look better 7 days from now. Whereas if they're on point and they're looking great 1 week out, they're going to be a lot more confident. Hey, I'm just going to kind of cruise into the show. I'll do a carb load maybe Wednesday and Thursday. I'll maybe do a very moderate non-extreme manipulation of water, something that is still safe and sound. And they go into the show a lot more calm and confident rather than kind of second guessing themselves. So trial and error is very important. The more experience you have, the more second nature it becomes, and the more confidence and trust you have in your approaches, and you start to learn your body better. So yeah, experience goes a very long way.
And even if you were to do like a trial and error, like if you had enough time to be able to even kind of at the moment,
Sure.
as far as, you know, body recomp, because I mean, I've even seen how that has changed, and it continues to change for me even over the years. So
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
Yeah, I can just share some additional thoughts while you kind of gather a question if you'd like. But I think a lot of people don't realize how much progress they can make if they just ate at theoretical maintenance and they weren't focused on cutting or bulking, right? A lot of progress can be made at theoretical maintenance, especially for novice trainees or intermediates, or just people that haven't crossed their T's and dotted their I's nutritionally. So again, let's just take this example of like a 160-pound female. Even if her goal is fat loss and she came to me as a client, a lot of times I start them off at theoretical maintenance. I don't put them into a caloric deficit right away, because I want to develop good eating habits and good training habits first. And by having them at theoretical maintenance and manipulating their nutrition in a smart way or evidence-based way, by increasing their protein and making sure they're getting 3 servings of vegetables a day and 2 servings of fruit per day, by doing all of those things and developing those habits, they actually have a hard time eating at theoretical maintenance because they're so satiated and they're eating a lot of whole food, and they're eating a lot less processed food. So it makes the dieting process a lot easier rather than restricting them and having them be in a 300 calorie deficit or 500 calorie deficit, whatever it may be. Because if you throw them right into a calorie deficit, now their hunger cues are going to go up, and now they're going to be fighting against those psychological and physiological signals of like, hey, I'm hungry, I want to eat more. And that actually reduces the likelihood of them sustaining the diet, staying on track. So again, I like setting people up at theoretical maintenance and just focusing on those dietary habits and those guidelines that I provide for them while they're lifting 3, 4, or 5 days per week and progressing in the gym. Like they have a clear plan when they go to the gym. They're not just doing random workouts. They're doing the same workouts every week, and they're tracking their lifts to ensure they're actually progressing. And that goes a really, really long way. And some tools, some measurements that I have people take, especially those who I know are in a high likelihood of body recomp, are things like circumference measurements, right? So for example, we have that 160-pound female. Let's say I put her at theoretical maintenance. She might still be 160 pounds 3 or 4 weeks later, but she might have lost 1.5 inches off of her waist.
Yeah.
So if that happens and we have that feedback, she's no longer going to be pissed that she didn't lose weight on the scale. She's going to have some sort of positive reinforcement that, hey, you did lose body fat because your waist circumference is down and you're getting stronger in the gym. So I can assure you that you are building muscle and losing fat at the same time, right? So having multiple tools in your toolbox is really important if you're trying to recomp.
Wow, I love that you share all of that because it's so true. That's something that I've experienced too with some of my clients. It's like I notice right away when they give me their nutrition intake, and that's what I go for as well. It's like, okay, let's set you up in your maintenance current, you know, place. And I notice all the time that like their nutrition is just way off balance. There's just like no protein in there. And once we kind of balance it out much more realistic and properly, then like you said, they're able to, feel much more satiated and stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. So, I just have a few, questions because I know we're reaching our time here. Just some
Sure.
fun questions, just to add. And what is something that maybe you don't enjoy that's eating that's not healthy?
Something I don't enjoy eating that isn't healthy.
No, that you do. I'm sorry.
Oh, that I do enjoy eating that's not healthy. So
Yeah.
like my favorite cheat meal kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's a great question. I do love a good burger and fries if it's like a really good burger and fries. What else would I consider like kind of a cheat? I do love like I'm a chocolate fanatic, so um I can easily devour chocolate ice cream and stuff like that. But I don't necessarily like view foods as like bad or good. I obviously
Hmm.
understand like what my limits are, what a proper portion is, like what fits within my goals. But yeah, I would definitely say burger and fries is up there for me. And then I'm a chocolate fanatic. So even when I'm dieting, I always have like a lot of raw cacao added to my meals. And that kind of like scratches that chocolate craving for me. So
Yeah.
pure weight loss. So I'll kind of give them I'll give you a quick analogy. Let's say I have a female that comes to me and she's 160 pounds. In her mind, she might think that she wants to weigh 135 pounds. But her physique might look better at 150 pounds if she gained, 15 pounds of muscle mass and lost 25 pounds of fat mass. So a lot of people give too much credit to the scale weight and they don't realize that their body weight is not their body composition. And again, a lot of progress can be made by adding muscle over time, and either losing fat simultaneously or minimally gaining fat and basically decreasing your body fat percent. That's really where you're going to start seeing the shape of your physique significantly improve, right? Where, okay, now your shoulders are rounded off more, your glutes are more curvy, your quads and hamstrings are more shapely, so on and so forth. So
Hmm.
if you take somebody that has very, very little muscle mass and doesn't resistance train, and you just diet them down to lose body weight and lose body fat, that physique most likely isn't going to be the aesthetically pleasing physique that they are hoping for and that they're
Hmm.
wishing for, right? So it's really important for both males and females, but especially females, to give more attention and time to improving their performance in the gym. So getting progressively stronger, improving their movement competence and the actual skill of the different exercises and the different movements. Because over time, that's what's going to build muscle and that's what's going to not only change their physique, but also benefit their metabolism. That's going to significantly increase their metabolic rate. So now they can handle more calories on a daily basis. That's going to improve their glucose tolerance and their insulin sensitivity so they can handle more carbohydrates efficiently. And it's going to improve a lot of other metabolic factors, like potentially their hormonal profile, and different health markers like their blood pressure, their resting heart rate, and so on and so forth. So there are so many benefits to resistance training and progressively getting stronger that a lot of people don't focus on, and they're heavily focused on the scale or how they look in the mirror.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, you said that perfectly well. Yeah, I was trying to think of like what other points that I wanted to ask on that, but I just can't think of. Yeah.
I can add like raw cacao to my oatmeal or raw cacao powder to my smoothie, or have some like 70% dark chocolate. And that really like still scratches my itch, and keeps me on track.
That's yeah, definitely. I try to find ways that you can, utilize other forms of the cravings that you have, and That's cool.
For sure.
What is something else that you enjoy besides like working, training and researching and all that kind of
Sure.
stuff?
So I love hiking. My wife and I like going to different national parks. So we kind of have a bucket list goal where we want to try to go to every single national park before our time expires here on this earth. So definitely love hiking, sightseeing, and just kind of being out in nature. And I still enjoy playing basketball. It's not something I do on a super regular basis, but these past couple of weeks I've been shooting around a lot more, and that was like one of my first loves growing up, so that's always fun. But yeah, I'm a pretty low-key guy. I love spending time with my puppy, my wife, and my soon-to-be son, and yeah, just being outdoors, being out in nature and everything like that.
That's awesome. All right. Well, it's been such a great time. Thank you for joining and for providing all that useful information. And
My
I will
pleasure.
make sure that we have, because you have so much useful resources, and you have your, which I don't even think we touched on, which is School of Gainz. You're the founder of School of Gainz. So that's really cool. And you provide a lot of resources and also services on there. So definitely be adding that on the episode show notes. So
For
again,
sure.
thank you so much.
My pleasure. I can add like a discount code too for the listeners if they want to,
Oh, that'd be great
check
for
out some of
Legion.
like the nutritional, the Ultimate Guide to Body Recomposition is basically a nutrition ebook. I have a couple training programs, and there's also plenty of free resources too. So different downloadable training programs and articles that they can access at schoolofgainz.com. And gainz is spelled with a Z, so you guys can just click that on the show notes. What would be an appropriate discount code for this podcast? What would you like me to make it?
Well, maybe we can go with the podcast name. So Soulrocker, like one word.
Okay. Yep, that's what I'll make it. I'll make it Soulrocker, one word, and that'll save you 20% off any of the program.